Hey everyone, welcome to the Personality Hacker Podcast. I'm Antonia Dodge.
And I'm Joel Markwitt.
And today we were talking about a blurb that Joel read in Scientific American Mind magazine that prompted an entire conversation around what it is that Personality Hacker does. Can you let people know what it was that you read that has spawned this massive conversation?
And I'm probably remiss in not doing this, but I actually didn't read the entire article. I read this. I have this habit of like skimming through articles and not actually reading the whole thing. But I came across this book this guy wrote called Personal Intelligence, and I forget the subtitle, but basically it's talking
and
about,
the writer's
name and all that. We'll put it in the podcast notes.
There's like 2 words that are important.
Just so you know, audience, none of this is research.
Yeah.
He was talking about personality or personal intelligence, and it made me think of, and then we had a conversation about it right before we started recording, the different types of intelligences. And this notion of personality hacker helping people raise their intelligence about themselves, about their personality, and be able to understand your personality and then grow into that. Just like your emotional intelligence or your intellectual intelligence or your kinesthetic intelligence. I really love that phrase, personal intelligence. I think it's a great phrase that I'd like to explore further with Personality Hacker and how we can, latch onto that. It's a great term.
So the book title was Personal Intelligence, and then you said that there was a subscript.
It's sitting right here.
Okay.
You talk for a second.
Okay,
I'll
I'll
be
talk.
right back.
I'll talk. Okay. Maybe I should describe what the different intelligences are as he goes and wanders off and grabs the copy of Scientific American Mind magazine. What he was referring to...
People can tell we're prepped,
Yeah.
So.
What he was referring to with like kinesthetic intelligence is body intelligence. So the ability for somebody to just naturally have dexterity, understand balance. People who end up in the Olympics are usually people who have naturally high kinesthetic intelligence. And then there's like analytical intelligence, which is sort of the traditional form that we think of. These are people who are usually pretty good at taking IQ tests, things like that. Analytical intelligence has become our culture's sort of ultimate definition of intelligence. Usually when they say, hey, that guy's a really smart guy, or she's really smart, usually that person has a high analytic intelligence. And then there's also emotional. Joel referenced EQ. EQ refers to emotional intelligence. This was written by a book by Daniel Goldman that talked about what emotional intelligence is, and it has some criteria, including the ability to control a person's, control your own emotions, to be able to know what your emotions are in the moment. It's not just a matter of control; it's a matter of being able to understand your emotions and have them, work for you, as opposed to being sort of a victim along for the ride. So there's different kinds of intelligence. We've always been very interested in this idea because, of course, we love the idea that people have different styles of intelligence. There's not just one style. And different personality types have a tendency to evidence different styles of intelligence. And we like the idea of sort of honoring all of these different styles of intelligence. And Joel ran into the phrase personal intelligence, or was it personal intelligence?
Yeah, so it's from the book, actually, Personal Intelligence, The Power of Personality and How It Shapes Our Lives by John D. Mayer, Mayer is the book. And then I've got kind of a definition here after you're done talking. I don't want to cut you off, but...
No, so basically the point of all that was that there's different styles of intelligence, and we have a tendency to have a preference for one or the other. It's usually what our natural talents, where our natural talents lie. And then there's different styles of intelligence that we build as a skill.
Yeah.
Talent is different than skill. Talent is what we kind of come out of the packaging with. And skill is what we build over time through exercising something, through, figuring it out, even if we don't have a natural talent for it. And there's certain styles of intelligence that are more beneficial to pick up as a skill, even if we don't naturally have them, at the blister packaging, even if they're not a talent.
Yeah. Well, and I think everybody has all these. I mean, we all have a level of emotional intelligence. We all have a level of cognitive, intellectual intelligence. We have a level of kinesthetic, all these different.
Yeah, I don't run indoors all the time.
Exactly.
Like,
some people
I have some ability.
Like my brother is kinesthetically awesome at this. Like he can do all sorts of crazy
he can do
stuff
anything.
with his body.
Yeah.
I just don't have that skill set as much.
I don't either.
I mean, better than some, but
Yeah, but I'm still able to like get an ice cream cone into my mouth, right? Like I'm
Most
not.
days.
Yeah. I'm not so kinesthetically off or
weekends.
unintelligent, right?
So
when one eats ice cream on the weekends.
This article is from Scientific American Mind, which if you haven't subscribed to this magazine, it's a fantastic magazine if you're really interested in how the brain works and all sorts of research. And it's just a neat magazine. This is from the March-April 2014 edition. And the article inside on page 34 is called Thinking About Tomorrow, Getting to Know Yourself and Your Future Self Can Put You on a Path Toward Contentment. And a lot of these excerpts are taken from this book by John D. Mayer, Mayer. In the article, he just says, personal intelligence is the capacity to identify and reason about information about personality. We use this ability to recognize information about people from their appearance, possessions, and behaviors, and then use that to label our impressions of a person and to match that impression to our knowledge of similar people. From such clues, we deduce how to behave with the person and how that person will treat us in return. And we look for clues about our own selves to better understand our needs and to map out our future plans. So I thought that's really obviously a personality hacker. This is the kind of stuff that we are talking about all the time. We've got training and products around this kind of thing. But I really like that kind of definition of personal intelligence. I love the phrase personal intelligence. I like this. And I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you kind of resonate with that, or is that?
Yeah, well, this is what I talk with my students about in the Profiler training course. One of the very first exercises we do is we talk about how everybody is personality typing everybody else all the time. We don't know we're doing it, but we have to. We have to be pattern recognizing because otherwise there would just be a glut of information. We have to see similarities. We have to put people in categories. We have to. If we saw every single human being on the planet as their own unique, non-patterned, absolutely individualized entity, that would be 7 billion people who have nothing in common with each other. And so we'd have to learn every individual completely all on their own terms. And that would be way too much information to process. We couldn't possibly do that. So what we do instead, because the mind can't manage that much information, is we start to pattern recognize. And what pattern recognizing does is it gives us the ability to see similarities between people's behavior and their attitudes and why they're doing the things that they're doing. And that gives us the ability to manage ridiculous amounts of information in a relatively fast way. I mean, it's the same, it's the mind's ability to, walk into your own room and know this is your room and that object is out of place. It's the exact same process and function. You're recognizing patterns as you go through life. And this is what we do with other human beings. And so we're all personality profiling all the time. We're all personality typing all the time. We're just using kind of sloppy criteria. If we don't have anything if we don't have a model or if we don't have a system that, is well researched or has, a lot of different people's input to it, what we usually end up doing is sort of defaulting to whatever the categories that make the most sense in our personal culture.
All blondes are dumb.
Yeah.
Ditzy blondes.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
Or all policemen like donuts.
Yeah. Right. I mean, some of them are truer than others. But yeah, that's what we end up doing is we default to these stereotypes and we're like, oh, stereotyping is wrong. Yeah, and impossible to navigate life without, right? Like we have to have some sort of typology system or we just cannot get through any sort of interaction with any other human being because it would be massively overwhelming in information. So we create these categories and these stereotypes. Now, the difference between personality typing and stereotyping is that generally personality typing and personality psychology is well researched, right? It's we stand on the shoulders of giants. We've got some extraordinarily brilliant minds who have come up with some of these categories, some of these ways of studying the mind. And most of the typing systems have between 20 and 100 years worth of research on, that's some of them, the Enneagram is based on the I Ching. And that's, we're talking like,
Carl Jung was reading that.
Hundreds of years. So we're looking at systems. When you look at personality psychology, you're looking at systems that are a little better than others. With my students in that first exercise, I say, tell me what you've been using so far and tell me what you think everybody else is using. Give me 5. Give me 5 categories that you believe you've been using to profile, and give me 5 categories that you think other people are using to profile.
Okay, so people that have not gone through profiler training, what are some of the ones you've gotten back? Are there any interesting ones, or maybe things you didn't think about? Are they pretty standard?
So what's really fascinating to me is that all of the answers that people give, like what their categories are, is it comes down to things like mannerisms and sometimes socioeconomic and what the person's saying. I mean, it gets real nuanced. What are my profiling systems? What are my 5 categories of typology? And it gets real nuanced, like how the person is behaving, like these real subtle things, right? If they're kind, that kind of stuff. And when you say, what do you think everybody else is using? It's like what kind of car you drive, how much money you have, whether or not you're attractive, the kind of clothes you're wearing. I mean, we all assume everybody else is like a shallow SOB. Like, that's what I've noticed. I've noticed in these exercises that I've gotten back, everybody thinks everybody else is totally shallow. But we're using these really complex personality, nuanced, structures that we came up with all on our own. And what's fascinating about that is there's probably some truth to that, right? Other people are probably judging us based on fairly shallow criteria without recognizing it. And they're also probably using some fairly nuanced criteria, just like we're using nuanced criteria and shallow criteria as well. We're doing the same thing.
To be fair, though, these are students who are actually interested in personality psychology. They're taking profiler training. And this is a pretty big course that's 6 months long and stuff. So they're dedicated, and they probably think about this more than the average person.
Totally. Absolutely.
So that's probably why they could potentially also have more sophisticated answers than what they expect everybody else to have.
Yeah, no question. No question. And there is some truth to what they say. What's interesting, though, is because we are not taught personality psychology as a culture, because we're not taught it in schools or in our homes, like nobody really talks about this. Sometimes you pick up a book on personality types and you think, oh, that's really interesting, and you give yourself a self-assessment and you flip to the page that's you and you read your profile, and then you kind of, after you've studied yours, now you read your mates. And then after you read your mates, you read your mom and dad's, and then every unhealthy relationship you've ever had, you go read theirs, and please help me understand why this marriage failed or whatever, or please help me look for the best mate, or, what's my boss, right? Why is he such a dickhead? And you read his personality type. So, that is about as comprehensive as it gets for most people. And that doesn't really mean that they're any good at using these patterns and categories, in the wild, right? Beyond just a curiosity. And that's kind of a disservice. It's a disservice to, I think, a lot of people that one of the most helpful tools in our tool belt can be the ability to understand really comprehensive and sophisticated categories to place people in. I'm just going to throw out, I'm not going to go into typology, like any specific typology that we use, because we use a couple different models. We primarily use Myers-Briggs and a variation on Myers-Briggs. We use the Enneagram some. We use the Graves model, which is a developmental model. We use Maslow's hierarchy. There's lots of models that Personality Hacker uses, but I think our bread and butter, I think the thing that most people come to us for is Myers-Briggs and variations on Myers-Briggs. And what's fascinating is if you just look at personality type through that one lens, and Myers-Briggs, by the way, is we're looking at 100 years old, right? We're looking at 100 years old. And that's a long time to develop categories of people. So we're not talking about, what kind of car you're driving, which is what ostensibly most people are using to personality profile, we're talking about things like, do you lead with a decision-making process or do you lead with an understanding process? So what's the difference between the two? Some people like to enter the world learning first and making decisions second. Some people like to enter the world making decisions first and then learning second. So what's the difference between these two people? One tends to be far more decisive than the other, and the other one tends to waffle a lot more. So if you're married to somebody who can't make decisions, it might be because they come to the world leading with learning. They want to gather more information until they make a decision. And vice versa. If you're married to somebody who seems to always know what's in their head and what they want, you might be married to somebody who leads with the decision-making process. Now, why is that useful? How is that more useful than what kind of car they're driving, right? How is that more useful than their socioeconomic status? Well, it's more useful because this is going to impact every category of their life. This is going to show up in everything. Are they having trouble making decisions on what kind of job they want? Or do they tend to run into a situation and realize that that isn't what they wanted to do at all? Like, we're talking about, when you're 22, you're like, geez, I don't know what to do with the rest of my life. Yeah. Or somebody goes, I know exactly what I want to do. And then now 15 years later, they're stuck in a job that they hate, right? So it's like, we're talking about things that hit every area of our life potentially. Mates, jobs, etc. And we're just talking about one area, like one tiny little element of this personality psychology tool. So I would say that personal intelligence, as you describe it, not that I've read the book, I've heard the phrase from you from a magazine that you didn't read the entire article.
I haven't read the article. Let alone the book.
Right.
I've just been skimming
this
through.
This is how our minds work. We see something that's interesting to us and we're like, oh, let's talk about that. So, but this kind of makes me think of like John Gardner's 9 intelligences, where we pick up the phrase kinesthetic intelligence, etc., analytical intelligence. He talks about 2 different styles of intelligence called introspective and introspective intelligence. Introspective is the ability to get inside your mind and really understand who you are as a human being and as a person. And introspective intelligence is the ability to understand other people, other people's dynamics, or their dynamics to you. So like sort of a social intelligence. And personal intelligence hits, I believe, 2 of those different things, if I'm understanding it correctly, having not read the book. But that's a part of it. It's the ability to understand yourself, it's the ability to understand others, and it's the ability to understand each other in relationship.
Yeah. Any last kind of things you want to talk about based on this before we go for today, and then...
Yeah, totally. Well, the one thing I did want to mention about, personality psychology is you'll see that there's 2 different elements. There's the element of people who just sort of, find it interesting. They saw a book, they read the book, they thought it was fun, they typed some of their friends. And there's not a lot of credibility to be had in that casual relationship with personality psychology. And I don't mean the person isn't credible. I mean, they don't give a lot of credibility to the tool itself because it's a hobby. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got the people who are massively in it, and they all happen to be academics. They're all doctors, PhDs, teaching this at colleges, universities, and they write huge books on it, and they're all into Jungian psychology, and it's like...
huge, dense books that are very difficult to get through.
Right, exactly. And so, and I know people who've read some of those books and didn't understand them at all when they got to the end of it, thinking they did, but they didn't, because it was way more complex and comprehensive than they were expecting. And so that seems to be sort of the duality of this world. There's either the people who are, using it as a party favor, and then there's people who are dedicating their lives to it. And never, neither the tween shall meet. So when we're talking about personality psychology, it's important to remember that there is massive credibility to this soft science. Yeah, it's a soft science. It's going to be hard to sate everybody who only wants to see the world in terms of ones and zeros and math. It's going to be hard to sate them for any sort of soft science. That said, there's a lot of credibility to be had here, and it can be helpful all the way from, the person who's just mildly interested and read their own, profile or personality write-up, and then discarded the book, all the way up to the PhDs who, have just crazy amounts of insight and information under their belt. One of my favorite writers is a writer named Robert Anton Wilson. He wrote a book called Prometheus Rising, and I tend to quote him a lot because he's sort of one of the mentors that I've really appreciated, even though I didn't know him when he was alive. He died, unfortunately, before I could meet him. Otherwise, I would have forced him to be my mentor. But he said any system or useful system can be made useful when brought down to its fundamentals, and it will also be useful if you expound on it indefinitely. I butchered the quote, but that's basically what it is. And so most of the personality psychology tools, they're useful even when they're at their base fundamentals, but most of them can be expounded on indefinitely. Like, there's no end to the rabbit's hole.
Yeah.
So how much of this tool you want to gather for your own personal power, how much of these tools that you want to implement in your life really depends on you. However, even only having just a curiosity can sometimes have a powerful and profound effect on a person's ability to make decisions and what direction they're going to go in life. That will actually, even if it's just a hobby, will increase their personal intelligence.
Think about what exciting times we live in, where we are not fighting for survival every day. We're not foraging for food. We're not having to war with other tribes, and we're able to get into some of these things now for the first time in human history and start understanding ourselves and each other in a more profound way. So I guess if you are listening and you're kind of like, you just stumbled upon us and you have no clue what Personality Hacker is all about, check out our website, personalityhacker.com. There's a test on there. You can get like kind of a summary of your personality type by going through that test on the site. And you can look around, and there's a lot of articles and resources and more products and services, things like that. And we're going to keep talking about these issues. So love to have you subscribe to this podcast. Email us, let us know what you want to hear about. Let us know if you'd like to make comments, any feedback, things like that. Some of those things.
Yeah,
so
sounds good.
So I'm Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And this has been Personality Hacker. We'll talk to you real soon.